Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining. And as always, got a great show today for you. And this is one of the ones that touches on things that are near and dear to my heart. This is the tabletop role-playing game topic show, which I do quite often. And more than that, it's my guest is an indie tabletop RPG developer, which is really cool because there's so much amazing things happening in tabletop role-playing games. In all transparency, we're having to re-record this part because I forgot to record. But during the first introduction, I described what's happening right now with role-playing games and especially indie tabletop role-playing games as it's like a Precambrian explosion. There's just this ridiculous, cool energy out there, and people are making all kinds of role-playing games that I would never even have conceived of, until it started happening. There's different focuses on why people play role-playing games. It's not just escapism anymore for a lot of people, but yet they're still having fun while they're doing it. There's just so much cool stuff going on out there. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce to you
again.
And if you feel deja vu, it's not the Mandela effect. I just am recording again. So that'd be a neat idea for a role-playing game. I bet you people have already done like Mandela effect type adventures. But anyway, I'm on a tangent. This is, people, Craig Campbell of NerdBurger Games. Craig, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for making the time.
Hi, Shane. Thanks for having me on the show again. It's great to be back for my second round.
It's almost like you were just here. The time. Wow, the time has just flown. And Craig is the, I don't even know what you call you. You are NerdBurger Games, basically.
I am the owner, the lead designer, the wrangler of freelancers, yes.
Do you ever call yourself the High Grand Poobah? Or the Grand High Poobah?
I would... Well, it's weird because when I made the first game, I was just kind of like, I'll just make a game. Let's see if I can do it. Right. And then eventually, after that happened, and then I started moving forward on other ones, then it was like, I should make an LLC. And it's like, okay, so now it's a business and it's real. And so I tend to stick with like official titles like owner and lead designer. Although, I'm the Poobah too.
You're the Poobah. You are the Poobah. All right. So, and we are coming to you through the magical ether of Zoom. And we were talking in the first go where I wasn't recording about how Zoom and Google Hangouts and Skype and all that have become just massively important. And our hobby, tabletop role-playing games, was, just a perfect match. So I know that companies have had a challenge getting their products out or, having conventions and things like that because of all of the social distancing and everything. But I don't feel that tabletop role-playing games have suffered. In fact, they probably stayed about the same, or in some cases maybe even flourished in some ways because everybody's doing it online. And I was thinking out loud, I have no data, but these days you don't have to have data. You just have to have an opinion, and it's true, right?
Sure.
So my feeling is that after things get back to normal, which I firmly believe they will, right? We'll eventually get to where we're not constantly social distancing. I'm guessing a lot of games that were in person before are going to go back or are not going to go back. They'll stay virtual because people have found things or convenience about it that they like. So I'm going to hand the baton back over to you because you had some wonderful insight on that I didn't record before.
Yeah, I think that, if you get the game experience you want out of an online experience, it may some groups may very well not go back to in person, or maybe like they might split their time. They do an in person thing once in a while in order to kind of celebrate camaraderie, and they'll do a dinner with it or something like that. But a lot of people, like, it's the convenience of, well, I don't have to drive anywhere and then drive back at the end of the night and deal with traffic and blah blah.
Let's just call it for us old people.
Yeah, well, that's but it's. There's something to be said for that. It's, people that have families and kids and, other responsibilities. It's just like, if I don't have to spend an hour combined time on the road and back, that's more time that I can be taking care of the things I need to take care of, which then, of course, frees me up to be able to do the role-playing game.
Right. Exactly. Oh, are they coming to get you? Was that you? Was that on your end?
They are. Yeah, they are. Sorry, you're gonna have to deal with that over here.
What transgressions did you like go to the gas station without wearing a mask? What happened?
No, I don't know what I did.
You don't know what I did?
I kind of just go to work and come home. I don't really do much else right now.
Well, that brings up another point that a lot of people, especially in indie RPG development and design, whether they're running their own company or freelancers or whatever, they're bivocational. So if I remember right, you're an architect, is that correct?
I am. In real life, I am an architect. In fake life, I am a game designer.
Do those ever overlap? Do the mental spaces you have to find yourself to be in, do those ever overlap, do you think?
I think they do to an extent. It just in terms of like the problem solving aspect and kind of what's at the core of each. I've often thought of both architecture and game design as being, and there's a lot of analogies you can draw, certainly, but like, I think a lot of times of like it is part craft and part art. There's, in architecture, there's the aesthetic of making a pleasant space that people will want to inhabit. But then there's also the craft of how does a building get put together? How do you make sure that all the pieces and parts fit? How does it stand up, keep the water out? And how does it work functionally? Like, all the spaces in the right places so that people can use the building.
Right. There's a lot that goes into it. Yeah, it's functionality and art because. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then game design has that aspect to it too. There's creating a beautiful product and having like lovely written words so that it's fun to read and it's like it's just entertaining language, and that it creates a it expresses or helps you express and experience emotion and certain play experiences that are all very kind of art oriented. But then there's the craft of like putting together a mechanical system that will achieve what you want the game to achieve and that will support that art.
Right. Well, that's cool. So do you have any do you have like a favorite building that you want to give a shout out to?
Oh boy.
Like you're like, this is like the total synthesis of perfect architecture. Like a building that inspires you.
A building that inspires me?
Not a building in New York that was designed to open a portal and bring in Gozer.
No.
That actually inspires you.
Are you familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water? It's in Pennsylvania, out in the country.
I'm not, but I'm going to look it up.
It's right on top of like a stream. There's a little waterfall. It's referred to as falling, colloquially as falling water. It's like it's also named after the owner, the original owner, and then current owner, and I don't even know what they do with that. But it's a unique little house that is there's a lot of horizontal to it. It's intended to kind of blend into the landscape. It doesn't pop up too high. And it's got all of these terraces that allow you to enjoy the views. And it's kind of situated on the water, so it integrates kind of into the water. Yeah, I'm looking
at it right now. It's super. I've seen pictures of it before.
It uses even if you don't know the name, you've probably seen it. It's a Lego set. It's one of those
cool.
that pops up quite a bit. And I'm also like, when I was in architecture school, I was a big fan of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who was a modernist, one of the early modernists. And he designed, like, in the early days of not architecture, but the early days of modernism and steel construction, where no longer did the walls have to bear the weight of the building. You didn't need to have big, thick masonry walls to carry everything. You had this steel skeleton and then a skin that could wrap around that. So you didn't need to see the structure. You could literally have windows that wrapped all the way around the building because the steel is deeper into the building. You're also not having to have load-bearing walls everywhere, so you can organize your space exactly how you want. You can utilize the space any way you want because your structure is taking up such a small footprint. And so Mies did a lot of really interesting, like early experiments in like just utilizing space the way he wanted to create an experience rather than being beholden to, well, I got to have, the walls can't be too far apart because this thing is really heavy.
Right. Well, and there's an interesting, and I want to touch on Frank Lloyd Wright. And people, we are going to be talking about role-playing games.
We'll get there.
Especially NerdBurger Games has a cool new game coming, so we're going to be talking about that.
And it's all about architecture. No,
yes.
It's not about architecture at all.
It's not, and it's called Good Strong Hands, and it's a really neat-looking game. But they actually have a Frank Lloyd Wright house here in Little Rock.
Oh, they're all over the place, yeah.
Yeah, and it's you think it's like, oh, it's this law, but no, I mean he designed how, and it's just in a neighborhood. You could just drive by it and take a look at it and everything. And I've heard, is
it a prairie style house? Is it like a little low, kind of horizontal?
I believe so. It's been a while.
Brick.
Yeah, it's been a while since
really low, like shingle roof, but really low slope. It doesn't have a real high peak or anything like that.
Let me look it up again real quick. None of them have high peaks that I've seen.
No, the prairie styles don't. They're all very low.
Yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright house, Little Rock. People are like, what? It's role-play games, Shane. Talk about role-play games. Hold on. Wright Buildings in Arkansas. So I guess he's got more than one. But he's definitely got one in Little Rock. And it's it's just in a, what do you call it? Just a neighborhood. You can just drive right past it.
Yeah,
so.
There's quite a few of those that are just kind of there's quite a few like in Illinois around Chicago, because he had a lot. He kind of gained notoriety amongst certain circles, and so people of means who had the money to spend because he got he was a little pricey to have design your house for you. He designed houses for a lot of people.
Okay, so anyway, getting back to the main topic, I'm going to tangent us yet again. We have this thing called we've actually probably already done it. The big icebreaker question that gets you comfortable just talking, right? Lifting up the veil on how this stuff works. But you're pretty comfortable on podcasts and all that. But I wrote this question out, so I'm going to use it. Well, I'm going to use it.
Since you made use of it, you put it together in pre-production. Let's make it happen. Yeah,
the official patent pending Shane Plays icebreaker question is what is your favorite burger?
Favorite burger?
Yeah.
Oh my. Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, so there are Culver's Butter Burger, maybe.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. Well, everything's better with just a heap of butter on it.
Yeah.
It's not something that I eat a lot. I'm not in Wisconsin anymore. That's part of it. Although Culver's is starting to expand around the country. There's one that's like. There is one in Georgia where I live, but it's not close enough to be convenient. I'll go with that. I don't know. Was it called the Butter Burger? It's been so long.
I don't know.
I've been in Wisconsin. But it's it's like the main Culver's burger.
Well, I mean, Wisconsin being such a dairy state, what a lot of people don't know, I'm not surprised they put butter on the burger because like here in Arkansas, we have a water hose, and I can twist a thing and water comes out of it. In Wisconsin, every house has a butter hose, right? You could just and you got butter like in the sink. You could just get butter, right?
Yeah, it comes. Every sink comes with one of those hose attachments that you can just pull off and take it right over to the stove and just right into whatever it is you're cooking. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if you want to, externally outside, if you want to butter down your car, you got the butter hose right out there. You drink,
and you've got a beer tap. Every house comes with a beer
every
tap
house.
installed.
Yeah. Well, they talk about like when I was a kid, drinking out of the water hose tasted the best. Well, when you're a kid in Wisconsin, drinking out of the butter hose is the best butter. Everybody knows this, right?
Oh, man. Sure. Why not?
Everybody knows this. All right.
Butter hose.
All right. Anyway, let's move on. Tell us a little bit about NerdBurger Games. I know that, what I'm most familiar with is, of course, your Capers game, which is like 20s gangsters with superpowers.
Yep.
And then you've got a game that's about to kickstart called Good Strong Hands. So I want to make sure to let people know about that. That's going to start, I believe that kickstarts beginning September 22nd.
Correct.
But tell us a little about NerdBurger Games. How'd you start doing this? What are the games that people seem to like the most, or whatever you want to tell us about NerdBurger?
Sure. I had done a bunch of freelancing, primarily for Wizards of the Coast and D&D, over the course of several years, and a little bit for some other companies, other games. And there came a point where 4th edition was kind of winding down, if you recall, into that period where they only put out kind of fluffy setting-oriented books, and they weren't doing crunchy stuff anymore because we found out a little while later they were playtesting 5e in-house, which means that a lot of freelance stuff kind of dried up because I was mostly writing for the magazines. And so I was like, well, I've done a bunch of this, so I can make a game. And I gave it a shot, and I made Murders and Acquisitions, put it up on Kickstarter. It funded.
Good. Now, what year was that?
3 years ago.
Okay.
Sound right? Yeah. 3.5 years ago that it kickstarted, I guess. Is that right? Yeah, something like that. But it, I did that, and like when I was getting close to, like, feeling like, okay, well, we're gonna roll up toward a Kickstarter, I started kind of tinkering with this other idea, and that was Capers, which you know about, or know the most about, and that's Roaring Twenties gangsters with superpowers, kind of an alternate history where superpowers start to pop up after World War I, and then it kind of repaints the Roaring Twenties with superpowers. And then I did some supplements for that, which takes it into the 40s and makes it kind of a noir game, and takes it into the 60s and turns it into a super spy game with superpowers. And then also did an off-world supplement that takes it into sci-fi. And
don't you have something cyber coming, or is that one already happened?
Oh, that's in the works.
Is that in the works?
Tinkering with that. That takes the whole story forward into the near, kind of alternate present, alternate future, and takes it into like cyberpunk realm. But I'm still just kind of toying with that. So a bunch of supplements that went to that kind of created a whole little universe, which has done fairly well and has sold fairly well. In the middle of all that, I created my love letter to horror movies called Die Laughing, which is a horror comedy game. It's GM-less, quick prep. Like, if you know the rules, you can prep the game in like 5 minutes. And it plays in just a couple hours. You portray a character in a horror comedy movie, and you're going to die. It's just what's going to happen.
It's just is the goal just to go out well?
It's to go
out
entertainingly.
Funny. Yeah, to go
out funny.
Yeah.
And then when your character bites it or gets turned into a sexy vampire or whatever, then you become a producer on the movie and continue to manipulate and influence the story.
Oh, how fun.
So you have something to do even after your character is gone.
So how's that one done? I remember you talking about it.
I kickstarted it. It funded and everything. It's out there. You wouldn't know it from this year because no conventions, but it sells well at conventions because it's a nice small game.
Yeah.
It's almost like an impulse buy. It's like a $20 softcover. So last year, it was one of those ones.
It was doing really well.
I sold a bunch of copies at Gen Con. It was really cool.
So that leads me to a question from your perspective, as somebody in the industry, if you will. Like, from my perspective, the lack of cons is a bummer, but it's not hitting my pocketbook. In fact, it's probably helping my pocketbook. But what as somebody who gets income, you do effort, and it's blood, sweat, and tears making this stuff, even though games are fun. Like, how significantly has the con collapse during social distancing, do you think, affected the industry?
I think it's affected it significantly outside of I don't know that the big companies have really gotten hit, because like the people who are going to buy the new Pathfinder release, if they went to Gen Con, that's where, because Pathfinder always releases something at Gen Con.
Right.
If they went to Gen Con, they'd buy it at Gen Con, because it's just part of
the
ritual of going to Gen Con. But if Pathfinder releases something right around Gen Con time, those people are going to order it. So I'm not saying that bigger companies haven't been hit, but I'm sure that it's the smaller indie stuff, especially like the indie companies where the people or person running the company or working for the company, where that's their primary source of income. Like that is like for me, it's my side gig. So it's
right.
It kind of sucks. I've missed out on some stuff this year. I had plans to go to like 3-4 big conventions, but online sales have been okay.
Well, that's what I was curious. Have
other smaller companies where it's their sole income? It's been a little rough. Well,
have you seen an uptick? And this may seem like an obvious question, but sometimes stuff doesn't play out the way you would assume it would. With the cons collapsing temporarily, we desperately hope. Have you seen an uptick in online like digital sales? Like I just want the PDF. Yeah.
For me personally, no, not an uptick. But it has surprisingly remained fairly steady.
So it's remained steady, but at least from your experience, I can't go to the con, or it's hard for me to go to the store and get a physical book. So I'm going to go buy the PDF off DriveThruRPG or whatever. You personally haven't seen an uptick there. Not really, because the con for me brings eyes on the product, brings visibility. Right. And so if there's people who go to Gen Con, for example, who that's how they find new games, they're probably not finding new games by wading through the thousands of titles at DriveThruRPG. Okay. Some people might, but my reach is only so far online. So it's getting better all the time, but conventions are a big deal, and like to have it's huge to have 10,000, 20,000 people walk by your game. Right. I hear you.
50 are going to buy it.
Yeah. No, I mean cons are important. Like I said, for me, it's just fun to go. But yeah, if my livelihood, or at least partial livelihood, depending on it, this has been rough. But I will say I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm not saying that there aren't some smaller shops that are not weathering it, but I thought I would hear a lot more of like, we're shutting down, and I haven't heard just a tidal wave of that. So
yeah, that's true. I don't think I've heard too much in the way. I think game stores have taken a hit more.
Yeah, game stores have.
Some game stores. I've every so often I see an announcement on my social media of somebody saying their favorite game store just closed. My friendly local game store where I ran my D&D game for years, they rolled up. So when they reopen, they're just going to focus on wargaming. So that was a bummer. But we have another game store here in Little Rock that's very well run. And I'm not implying the other one wasn't. The other one, right. He was newer. So he was still he'd only been going for a couple of years because he had bought the store from somebody else. But we have another store here called Game Goblins that they seem to do pretty well, and so I think they'll be okay. Sure, and part of it's a question of how you can adapt. Yeah, like there's some stores are in a position to be able to adapt better. Some stores are being run by someone who maybe comes up with ideas right to adapt better, and some people just aren't prepared for that. And no blame falling on anybody. Like nobody. I've thought myself about like what would I do if I owned a small business right now? Like
I don't know what I would do.
What would I have done? Like the types of small business that I would run. Like what would I suddenly have to do?
Especially small businesses like game stores that depend not just on people coming in and buying stuff, but there's community in the store. Yeah. Right? Like they're coming in, they're playing games, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. But anyway, I'm glad to hear that your online sales have not, dipped or anything. And I'll tell you another thing I've been surprised about, which will lead us in. This is a segue. See, folks, this is a segue. We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. I thought, because a lot of people have been hit financially, but crowdfunding has not really died. I mean, if anything, it seems just as healthy as it was before. So that being said, you, sir, as a indie RPG shop, you rely on crowdfunding. So tell us about your newest exciting crowdfunding project that is coming on September 22nd.
Sure. It's called Good Strong Hands, and it's a tabletop role-playing game. Like the tagline for it is a darkly whimsical game about saving your fantastical world. So it's inspired by movies like The Neverending Story, Legend, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Willow, all those kind of more fanciful, light-hearted. Well, although they, a couple of those have their dark moments.
Sure.
Movies kind of from my youth, and you portray like fantastic creatures or human allies who have come from Earth to the world of Reverie, and you're fighting to save it from destruction by this faceless, malevolent thing, this force of entropy and destruction known only as the Void. It's like if you've seen The Neverending Story, it's the Nothing. It's just called the Void.
It's the Nothing, but there's not a wolf with red eyes or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What color eyes were that? No. Anyway,
it's been a while.
Yeah. I love the Neverending Story. And maybe there's something wrong with me, but what was Atreus' horse's name that everyone always
talks? Artax is okay. Everybody, spoiler for a 30-plus-year-old movie.
Yeah.
That scene.
Yeah.
Broke me.
Did it? See, it didn't. I was like, I felt bad, but there's still people like, I'll tell you the scene that broke me when I was a kid. Did you ever watch The Black Hole?
Oh, very, very long time.
So there was Vincent, which is a robot, and there was Old Bob, which is a robot. Yeah, that was
like the banged up version.
Yeah, he's like, when Old Bob bought it, I boo-hooed for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And my family's all around me like, what? What is it? And then they're like, a robot. And
a cranky old robot died.
I just couldn't. And then they're like, what is it? A robot? And they just left me there because they couldn't understand why I was so upset that a robot bought it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It hurt me. It hurt me in a deep, deep place when Atreyu lost his best friend. And I was and then didn't come back. I was like, well, certainly he'll somehow come back at the end.
They left that horse dead.
Artax died.
Yeah, Artax died in the swamp of despair.
In a horrible way.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he gave up. He mentally he failed his wisdom or willpower saving throw or whatever.
Yeah,
couldn't get him out of the mud. But yeah, that is a huge piece of pop culture. Like I saw pictures that there's people that they cosplay that.
Oh God, yeah.
They walk around with just the horse head and leave it in the carpet. And then a couple of feet away,
they just got the reins and they get down on their knees.
Yeah, exactly.
And they start screaming, Artax, keep trying.
Yeah, such a fun world, though. I mean, I love the rock biter and I love the dude on the snail, and just it's such a fun, whimsical world. Other than all the darkness and psychological despair of Artax dying. But anyway, the movie, or not the movie, your game tries to capture that kind of, it's fantasy, but it's not like Tolkien fantasy.
I specifically took the route of not including in the game a lot of the kind of tropey, quote unquote, standard fantasy races. There are no elves, dwarves, halflings, gnomes, ogres, orcs, goblins. I took all the stuff out that kind of has a lot of preconception built into it, and in some cases some baggage that's built into it, and just kind of I got rid of a lot of that stuff. So you're playing brownies and pixies and like stonekin, which are like rock people, and red caps, and if you're playing a human, you're a human from Earth. You are a rarity, an oddity in the world of Reverie.
So you kind of fall into Reverie somehow?
You're not the predominant. Well, you travel to the world of Reverie from Earth somehow. You'll define that just like, Bastion in the Neverending Story ends up going to Fantasia eventually. Does he end up in Fantasia?
At the very end. Well, at the end of the first movie, now there's the books.
Falcor comes to Earth too, so there's a way to travel.
Because they go after the bullies.
And in Labyrinth you have a person. Is it Sarah? Am I remembering that correctly? Who travels to the Labyrinth?
Let's just call her who she is, Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly.
Oh my goodness, young Jennifer Connelly, one of my early crushes. So yeah.
So if you're playing a human, you're not like from this dominant
species
in Reverie. You're an oddity.
Is it fair to describe Reverie, and this isn't a 100% comparison, but it almost feels more like a world of fairy, or, you know what I'm saying? Would you say it's more like that than a traditional fantasy world?
Yeah, the game started very Fae oriented. In fact, initially all of the different types of folk that you can play were all fairy types, or some kind of variation on that. But then as I went along, I realized, well, I'm kind of doing like nature spirit type things too. So I didn't stick I didn't stick to that. I let it kind of go where it needed to go and create a number of different types of folk. So, but it has a Fae feel to it. The idea is,
it's got kind of that feel.
It's got that lighter feel. So, but then
it's almost like you're in a dream. It almost feels like you're in a dream. Yeah.
And the name Reverie is chosen for a reason, because that is a daydream. And in the game, like, there's not a ton of setting information that's provided for you. The game supposes and provides direction and encouragement for the players to help build the world with the GM as they play. So if you're playing a faun, there's only a couple of sentences that describe what a faun is, and then, like, okay, well, what is faun society like? That's for you to describe. For your Reverie, what is faun society like? What are their family units like? What's their government like? You know, what types of things, other than, you know, being fauns and, you know, obviously being good at performing, dancing, and singing and things. You know, what other details are there about them? You can help develop that, and so the GM, you know, throws out questions to draw players in to help develop that. Players are encouraged to just offer stuff up to help kind of flesh out the world. The idea being that the players will help to build the world, and then they'll save it. And hopefully that means that they'll be more invested in the saving of the world, since they had a part in creating it in the first place.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. It's like, no, you can't wipe out that community. I actually helped, you know, I'm invested. I can see that. It's not just words on paper or number stats or something. Like they've invested some of themselves. So that's
yeah. You're not
smart.
Saving my world.
Yeah,
I didn't write up a world for you to save.
Right.
You're going to create a world for you to save.
Have you done that with any other games, or have you seen that? Like, I'm curious if it does.
I mean, the play Powered by the Apocalypse games, for the most part, don't have most of them don't have a huge amount of setting information in them. They're very much about kind of building the world as you go.
So I've actually and I don't want to tangent here, but Powered by the Apocalypse comes up all the time, and I've never actually played it, but I know that,
I've played some.
The half, like, if it's on Kickstarter, that it's either 5e or Powered by the Apocalypse. So I hear it come up all the time. So it sounds pretty neat.
Get ready, because PBTA it'll continue to be there, I'm sure, but it's going to be usurped any time in the next year or two by Blades in the Dark hacks. Which has become quite popular with people to hack that into different genres. And
I keep hearing more and more about Blades in the Dark as well. Like, people will say, "Oh, that sounds like Blades in the Dark." So that's why I like talking to folks like you, and not just focusing on the big boys, because there's so much interesting stuff going on out there that it's easy to miss, you know, and then all of a sudden it comes out and you're like, oh, that's a brand new thing. And people are like, no, man, that's been going on for 10 years, right? It's been incubating out there for 10 years. So, well, that's neat. So thanks for the heads up and the tip there. So mechanic wise, mechanically, how would you describe Good Strong Hands?
I guess I would call it rules light. It's not necessarily as rules light as some people might consider that, to, you know, what they think that means. But basically, each character has 4 core traits, which are body, mind, charm, and heart. And body and mind are kind of what you think them to be. Charm is your social side, you know, the charismatic side of you. And then heart is your character's kind of inner fortitude, perseverance, their will. And it also kind of comes into play with utilizing minor magic, like you can, you know, force minor magical effects through your heart.
Oh, okay.
And if you make a check,
is everybody magical, since it's sort of it's not Fey, but it's Fey-ish?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It depends on what talents you choose. There's different talents will give you access to different realms of magic, and so then you can start doing little magical things if you take those talents. But you could pick entirely talents that don't do that.
Okay.
And so each trait is rated 1 to 4. Higher is better. And when you're going to make a check, you'll roll a number of d6s equal to your rating. There are ways to manipulate that number up and down a little bit as far as number of dice that you're rolling. And you're going after a target number of 4, 5, or 6.
Okay.
Trying to get at least one of your dice to hit that target number or better.
And then you're like, if I have a heart of 3, I roll 3 dice?
Roll 3 dice, say it's a target number of 5. So you're trying to get at least one of your dice to hit 5 or better.
Okay.
And then, so if none of your dice hit the target number, your character fails, the GM can introduce a complication, and you mark a checkbox on the skill track. And when the skill track fills up, you advance your character in some ways.
Okay. So that's quote unquote XP.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So is a typical adventure always going to evolve the void, or are there side adventures or quests? You see what I'm saying? Like, what would set up for me and the listeners, if you will, like if I sat down to play this, like, hey, we're going to do a session of Good Strong Hands. Like, what kind of adventure, could people expect?
Can we jump quick to just wrapping up the mechanics?
Yep.
And then we'll definitely hit on that because I want to talk about that.
In fact, I'll take when you finish the mechanics, I've got some quick show notes I need to throw out, and then we'll get over to the what a evening or session, a Zoom meeting of what a Zoom meeting of Good Strong Hands might look like.
Sure.
Yeah, keep going on the mechanics, please. If
exactly one die hits your target number, you succeed. And you mark on the spirit track, which is a series of checkboxes, and that's a currency that you can spend in the game. So you'll gain spirit and you'll spend spirit for different things. And then if you get 2 or more hits, you succeed with a boon, so you get a better success, something really good happens, and then you mark 1 on the shadow track because you have proven that your character is very capable and they're running around doing wonderfully heroic things, and the void has noticed you.
Ooh.
So it starts to plant the seeds of corruption in you, and if you fill up your shadow track, you gain a corruption, which is a dark power that brings you closer to falling to the void. So you get like, oh, I've got this cool little power that I can do this really neat thing with, but every time you gain a corruption, it's one step closer to actually losing your character to the void.
So it's, and I'm not saying that that you copied this mechanic. It just reminds me. I don't know if it was the One Ring. There's a Lord of the Rings 5e game, and instead of alignment, they had the Sauron or whatever, and it was like, can you resist? Because the whole point, like everyone's like Boromir was terrible. No, Boromir was just the first person to fall to the influence. Like everybody eventually would fall to the influence. And so the thing is like, can you resist, falling to the influence? So that sounds really interesting. I like that is what I'm saying. So, I want to make it, yeah, go ahead.
One of the things you can spend spirit on, just talking about resisting the influence, one of the things you can spend spirit on is to avoid marking that shadow.
That's pretty cool. So is that the closest there is to like an alignment type system? Is there an alignment at all? Or,
no.
like I'm good or I'm bad, or I guess you have to be good, right? Because you're trying, well, I don't know if good's the right way, but you're trying to avoid falling to the influence of the void.
I would think that most people who play this game will be playing heroic characters, but then there are certainly, you can walk the line. You could play where I'm gonna let myself gain shadow and I'm gonna gain some corruptions, but then I'm not gonna let myself fall to that last corruption. I'm just gonna get these 2 and I'm gonna have this cool power. But that means my character is kind of walking a line, and they're like if I suddenly start rolling really well when I don't have spirit to spend to prevent the marking shadow, then I'm gonna have to mark more shadow, and now I'm running the risk of
So as you get corruption points, or as you become more corrupted, you get abilities.
Yeah, they're specifically called corruptions. They're on your playbook.
Oh, so the corruption isn't okay.
Is an ability, yeah. And once you gain, if you gain all 3 corruptions and then fill up your shadow track again, now your character falls to the void completely, and you hand your character sheet to the GM.
To the GM, which that is wonderfully old school to happen in a new school game because. I like consequences. I don't want every game to be so hard that it's like, don't name your character till 3rd level, rookie. But I do like that, hey, this could really, have consequences. And then, I like that a lot. So another thing I want to point out here is, and this will be in the show notes, which I'll mention some stuff here in a second, but when this episode goes out, if people go to shaneplays.com, or you could just go to Kickstarter and type in Good Strong Hands or NerdBurger Games. Your cover art does not show combat.
No.
It shows 2 friends helping another friend.
With their good, strong hands.
Right, with their good, strong hands. So, I'm guessing conflict can happen, but it doesn't sound like that, every session will potentially be 2 hours of melee.
There's certainly combat capability in the game. There are characters, there are talents that are geared toward combat. There are adventures in the book, and in the game, what I refer to, they're actually they're 2-page adventure spreads that I call story schemes, but they're fairly loose. They're a lot of inspiration. Like, here's the background, here's basically what the adventure is about, here's things to ask the players to help fill things out. Here's points of interest, interesting characters, and then some of the challenges that you might face, and the GM and the players kind of build that story. And so there's the potential for combat in some of those story schemes, but killing somebody, like killing a sapient creature, you mark shadow.
Right.
That helps the void. The void is out to destroy everything. Killing people.
Right.
Brings the void closer to what it's trying to do. So, but there's certainly combat kind of stuff in there. There's the story schemes that are in here range the gamut from stuff that is very classic fantasy style. Like, I couldn't put this book out without okay, here's a dragon. And the dragon is flying around murdering people and burning crops in towns, and you have to stop it.
Gotta figure out a way to do it.
And that might involve fighting it. And but then there's all sorts of other things. I tried to basically generate story schemes that would do all sorts of interesting things. There's a story scheme that is built to, it's kind of its own thing, but it can be used as an adventure to bring back, to redeem a character that has fallen to the void.
I was wondering, because like you said, you're not dead, you just hand me your character sheet. So that would be a great story line to try to redeem somebody.
Right. There's one where there's a town where all the citizens of this little village are beset by terrible nightmares, and they're constantly caught in these horrible nightmares, and you have to figure out how to wake them up. There's there's a story scheme that where a city the council members in this city have all kind of thrown in with the void. They've all gone dark, basically. And the people of the town are very oppressed, and they don't have the means, they have the means, but they don't really have the organization to rise up and fight back. And so the story is not about it's not about killing or otherwise subduing the corrupted council members. It's about organizing the people in the city to rise up against these oppressors.
Okay.
And take their town back.
So do characters, not players or the GM, obviously, I think they would probably know going in, but when campaigns begin or however the overall stories work out, are characters aware that the void exists, or is it like everything's hunky-dory and then they start getting little hints that something's off?
The assumption is that they know, because the void keeps coming back every few centuries.
I see.
This is a recurring thing, yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to mention on the mechanics or anything?
No, I think that about covers it. I mean, there's
right.
there's a little bit more to it, but that's the basics of it.
That sounds good. Yeah. There's a little bit of crunch in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't seem like that it's, that you're having to look up tables every 3 seconds to see what your character can do at any given moment. Yep. So I'm going to throw out some quick show notes, and then when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about the setting itself, and maybe Craig will tease us, because right now when you go to the Kickstarter page, it's just like, hey, notify me when it launches. But maybe Craig will tease us a little bit with what the Kickstarter might involve. And folks, remember that will launch on September 22nd. So if this show releases before the 22nd, you need to run over to the Kickstarter and you need to notify me on launch. But if it's the 22nd or after, go over there and check out all the cool stuff that will be up there. But as a reminder, folks, show notes and links for each show are up at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. Last week's, well, it's not last week's show, it's the last show that I did, is archived on the blog, and that's episode 226, Darklands, which makes this episode right here 227. See how the logic works. And don't forget the podcast does go out on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean. I also put the podcast on YouTube. It's just the audio, but some people prefer to listen on YouTube. And this is this is how important this is. I'm going to shake like David Letterman used to do. I'm going to shake my thing. This is how important this news is. Amazon Music is now doing podcasts. In fact, Spotify's, the big news is Spotify's shares dropped by like 1.3% because Amazon has jumped in, and Shane Plays Geek Talk is in the podcast at Amazon Music. So go check that out if you use Amazon Music. Shane Plays is also carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. And I don't like to spend a lot of time on this, but I try to mention it each show. Shane Plays Geek Talk does have a Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/ShanePlays. The links will be on the show notes at shaneplays.com. You can support as little as $1 an episode. And I encourage people to keep up with my Twitter. And the reason is hopefully I'm being interesting on Twitter. I don't know. But secondly, I push out a lot of like sales and news on like RPGs and video games and this not where you can get stuff like I push out a lot of Humble Bundle links, and you can get some really good stuff from the Humble Bundle. You could get stuff from Bundle of Holding. I'll push out all kinds of stuff if I see a sale or something like that going on. But those Humble Bundle links are affiliate links. So, that helps me out if you buy through those. So I'm not, you don't have to do Patreon. You don't have to go follow my Twitter and do affiliate links, but I'm not going to complain if you do. So just want to make sure people know about that.
The void commands you to go to the
void
Patreon.
Commands you. No, see what happens is...
Or use the affiliate links. The void commands you.
I'll make you a special deal just because Craig's on the show. If you support the Patreon, or if you follow and buy from one of those affiliate links, I'll take away one of your shadow points. How's that? Unless you want a corruption, which then I'll give you one. So, but folks, you can follow it. The Twitter is Shane Plays, ShanePlays, and that is I'm constantly chattering and I never shut up Twitter. If you just want the meat and potatoes, or I'm just pushing out news and updates and stuff like that, go to Shane Plays PR. That's ShanePlays PR, and that's just the basics where I'm not all just blah, 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 blah. I talk about every little fevered thought that comes across my brain. And finally, folks, don't forget about Cursova magazine. Cursova is an adventure magazine that has sci-fi, fantasy, pulp, RPG stuff. It's super cool. Cursova is keeping the light of the pulp magazines alive, folks. Go check that out. Cursova magazine, CIRSOVA magazine. It's really cool stuff. Okay, so that's it for the show notes. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, the game. I don't know. Do you want to talk about the Kickstarter, or do you want to talk about a little bit more of the world? Or
well, the world is kind of what you make it to be. So
yeah.
I think we've gotten a sense of that. I mean, the Kickstarter is there's a PDF level that's $20. There's a $40 that'll be PDF and hardcover. And if all goes well, the hardcover, the size of the hardcover will bloat up quite a bit based on stretch goals and a premium backer level where we'll get to that in a second. And then there's also I'm going to do like a slightly higher level that is PDF and then a Kickstarter exclusive like alternate cover. Hardcover, signed, and all that kind of fun stuff. And then there's like the premium level where you remember those story schemes?
Yes.
The backer will work with me and we will concoct 3 interconnected story schemes to basically function as a trilogy of stories that are kind of all themed together, that work together, and then there'll be additional information added about like how you can use some of the other story schemes to flesh this out, or how you can other elements that you might want to work into the story in other adventures to kind of take. So you've got a trilogy that you could blow up into a shorter campaign, or into a much longer campaign if you use all the pieces and parts that we're going to provide.
So that at that level, they literally get to work with you to develop that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I put together the questionnaire. It's going to be it'll start with a bunch of questions about like what you want the first, second, and third adventure to be about, what the theme is, and I've got a bunch of suggestions. And then there's you can also suggest your own. And then I'll start to kind of develop out from that questionnaire, and then when I get it to kind of to a certain point, I'll check in with the backer and say, okay, this is where I'm at. What would you like to see kind of built out a little bit more? And it's not going to be back and forth 20 times, but the backer will be involved at a few different points.
Cool. That's pretty neat. I've seen some Kickstarter reward levels where the backer gets to interact and get some custom content or inserted into the story or something like that. But that's a pretty neat level, where it's like, they don't have to fly out and meet you and all that. They just get some custom hands-on, developing their adventure scheme, as it were. And you said an adventure scheme is usually just like 1 or 2 pages. It's just like kind of...
It's a 2-page spread typically. So what'll happen is if you do this, if you take this backer level, you'll get 3 of those. So 6 pages of that plus 2 more pages of just other stuff that you can use to kind of help flesh that out. So it's you could almost translate this backer level as Craig helps you design your whole campaign.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So, those are the main backer levels that you see. Do you? And I know that stretch goals are not as popular as they used to be, because people have discovered that like, oh, we've just got to keep feeding the fire here, and then it bites them in the rear later. But do you think you'll have any stretch goals or anything like that? Or
yeah, absolutely. What I'm doing is I'm starting with the slimmest book possible. I've done this with my other games as well. It's like, here's the game. Here's what I consider like the slimmest version of this game I could make. It's got this many. It's got six of the different folk that you can play. It's got like 10 story schemes in it, and all the rules and everything else that goes with it. And then with stretch goals, we'll add more folk. We'll add more story schemes. We'll add other stuff. And all of that is written, play tested. It's in editing. So I do not fall to the trap of, and now we're going to spend the next year developing all of this stuff and play testing it. And I've worked very hard with my Kickstarters to turn them over in a reasonable amount of time. I've never had a Kickstarter that took longer than 7 months.
Nice
to turn over. And I would say my average is about 4. If you take all of them, I average out to about 4, because I've turned Kickstarters over in 2 and 3 months.
Nice. So. You were talking about edited, play testing, this, that, and the other. How big is the team that you've worked with on Good Strong Hands, and do you want to shout out to anybody?
Sure. The team is actually relatively small because it's kind of a small scale game. I was able to essentially design it all myself, although if all goes well, there will be 5 backers that help design some things.
Nice.
And then I've got an editor, Vincent Harper. The artwork is by Serena Malian, who once you get to the Kickstarter page, you'll see it in the video and everything. It's lovely, it very much brings a kind of a storybook feel to the game. And then Todd Crapper is doing the game design. Yes, that's his last name. He makes that joke too.
Does he? Okay.
Yeah. And similarly, his graphic design is kind of bringing a storybook kind of feel to everything. And then I had Stefan. Oops. Go ahead.
I was fixing to say, you've mentioned storybook a couple of times. I think that's a good way to summarize. It's not storybook in that it's completely childish, but it has that kind of atmosphere to it, like you're adventuring in a storybook. Yep. But anyway, yeah, you were going to shout out somebody else.
And then Stefan Pennington, I consulted with him on a bunch of just fantasy tropes and their, well, just how crappy some of them are.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I talked with him helped to focus myself to make sure that, like, I'm providing artwork when I do my art orders. The artwork is making sure to hit on a lot of, because especially, like, there's not a lot of humans, so like there's a few human characters, but then there's all these other weird creatures. But all your pixies shouldn't all look the same, and all your fawns shouldn't all look the same. So you want to have all sorts of variety with that. And we got into some of the baggage that comes with some of those kind of more classic, used a lot. Fantasy races, and that was one of the things that helped to kind of push the game into all of these other weird folk that you don't necessarily get to play very often in fantasy games, which I think has served the game very well, because it's helped to make it less classic fantasy and more, like you were saying, more storybook, more light fantasy, but again with that dark twist.
I like your tree people a lot. That's immediately attention grabbing. People can't, on the artwork for the upcoming Kickstarter, there's one, and then there's one I'm looking at here in the Zoom meeting that you've used for your background. Some of the, I see looks like maybe a pixie. What do you describe? What race is the lady floating with the bow? What's going on with her?
She's a sylph, a wind spirit.
Okay. And then you've got that looks like a human to me. Oh, you've got a little. Is that an otter?
Yeah, there's a wildkin, and there's a bunch of different kinds. Actually, the otter wildkin came out of a playtest. I had what did I have? I had badger, fox, and rabbit wildkin.
I love it.
Which are anthropomorphized animals, but you can also transform into that animal. Nice. Somebody said, "Why isn't there an otterkin?" And I was like, "Okay,
there has to be an otterkin."
So boom,
so cute,
otterkin.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that it's a direct relation, but it feels a little bit like the races and stuff of like Narnia as opposed to Tolkien, right? And I'm not saying you're not going to be having Narnia adventures, because that, C.S. Lewis had a whole thing going on with that, with symbolism in the story he was trying to tell. But it's much more of that kind of feel than there's orcs surrounding the castle. So it's just that's not really what's going to happen here.
Well, there are fawns in it, and that's Mr. Tumnus.
I was fixed to say, is there a fawn named Mr. Tumnus? Because
not specifically, but yeah,
don't drink his tea. So yeah,
but yeah, there's even here. I'll give you a scoop. Let this be your scoop.
Look right here. We're having a scoop on Shane Plays Geek Talk.
There's a type of folk that I want to include in here, because there's two that I've been kind of keeping mostly close to my vest, which are the ones that are really kind of out there compared to the stuff that everybody knows about from the playtesting,
right?
Which is the Paragon, I'm calling them, which is a Paragon is a unique animal. They are the one animal of their species who is fully sapient, can speak, and functions sort of as a shepherd and an emissary and guardian of their people. So if Aslan, the lion, was just the king of the lions and not a Christ figure,
right.
He's a paragon.
He's a paragon. I like that. And there's one per
every type of animal. So when you create,
so there's a paragon otter. There's a paragon. Yeah.
If you create a paragon, assuming it gets into the game, if you were to make a paragon, you will be a unique creature, and you are eternal.
Wow.
You have reincarnated over and over and over.
Once again, that adds to that sort of storybook or Fae feel. I like that a lot. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. Unfortunately, I gotta wrap us up. But before I do that, I don't. Was there anything else that you definitely wanted to mention? all of
Now
this
I'd like
fun
to
stuff.
tell you about this cult I belong to. No. Good Lord, no. Would you like to sell Amway?
Yeah, frantic disclaimer. He's joking.
Look it up. Yeah, no. I think we covered it pretty well. This was a nice conversation.
Okay. Good. Well, I certainly wish you luck, folks. Remember, this is going to launch on the 22nd, and also just check out NerdBurger Games in general because Craig's doing some fun stuff out there. I also want to give a shout out. We didn't have time to get into it on the show, but Craig runs a good Discord channel. What's the best way for people to find your Discord channel? Is it invite only, or is you got a link floating around out there?
There's links floating around. There's a link in my pinned post in Twitter. There's if you go to nerdburgergames.com, there's a link up at the top to connect you to.
Right, it's a good Discord, media. And a lot of times Craig will throw artwork, or he will throw thoughts and say, hey, what do y'all think? And he's trying to get feedback from the Discord channel. So I think that's good that he does that. And he also, speaking of cons, you ran a virtual con in your Discord channel.
Yeah, I got bored.
Not that long ago. Yeah, because you don't have anything going on. And from what I could see, I mean, I kept a pretty good eye on it. It seems like it was pretty successful. You had a lot of engagement. So
yeah, it went really well. Will I do it again next year? I don't know. But
you don't know.
But this one was a good time.
It was a neat thing. It was a neat thing for you to do, and it looked to me like you organized it well. So again, folks, this is Good Strong Hands from NerdBurger Games. Craig Campbell has some boring business title, but I'm going to call him the Grand High Poobah of NerdBurger Games. He's the bun on top. He's the top bun on NerdBurger Games.
Yeah, I keep everybody else stacked up nice and neat.
Stacked up nice and neat. And Good Strong Hands is a darkly whimsical game about saving your fantastical world. And folks, go to NerdBurger Games and check out the other stuff because, like you see, he's got Die Laughing and capers and some other really cool stuff. And if you haven't tried, because a lot of people, when they hear role-playing games, they still think of D&D, right? But if you haven't tried some of these indie RPGs out there, they have a different energy to them. I love D&D, don't get me wrong. I'm not against Pathfinder and the bigger games that are out there. But there's some really cool stuff going on in indie RPGs, and a lot of that stuff ends up bubbling up into the bigger games later. So if you're wanting something a little bit different, try out, what I used to do, and boy, this is maybe a weird comparison, but used to, in my youth, when, the CDs you bought were really important, right? That was vitally important, what CDs I would, on payday or whatever, whenever I would go to the CD store, I would always buy something that I knew, and I would buy something I didn't know. I'm just going to check this out. And yeah, sometimes I got some stuff I was like, what is this? But I discovered some really cool stuff doing that I never would have otherwise. Yeah. So go check out NerdBurger Games and check out, the indie RPG scene. There's some really cool stuff going on out there. But anyway, last thing, Craig, I didn't warn you about this. So I hope you don't lawyer up on me for any mental damage, but I do the bad joke of the week on Shane Plays Geek Talk. So I have the bad joke of the week. I have it right here. Okay. Why did nobody trust the low dexterity wizard?
I don't know. Why did nobody trust the low dexterity wizard?
Because he can trip at any moment.
Oh,
that is the correct. That is the correct response, sir. That is the correct. Well, Craig, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope that Good Strong Hands is a success for you, like your other Kickstarters and games have been. And stay in touch. And I will be as Palpatine said to Anakin, I'll keep my eye on you. So I'll be keeping my eye on NerdBurger. And I'm going to have to go to Wisconsin and get a Butterburger.
You might be able to find a Culver's near you.
Yeah, I want a burger, and I want butter on that burger. Stat. And then I want your electric shock paddles standing by nearby whenever I seize up.
Yeah, it comes with a priest.
What was it? That old Saturday Night Live, the Schwartzkys, or I'm Bob Schwartzky, and they were always they were in Chicago, and they were always eating like pork and drinking beer.
They were always just about to have a heart attack.
One of them, they had a heart attack, and they pounded on his chest, and he got back up and kept drinking beer.
Go Bears!
Stop Bear! Yeah, they were the ones that were Ditka. They were like Ditka. Yeah. They're like Ditka versus a hurricane. Ditka. What if it's Hurricane Ditka? They were like, they couldn't process that one. So, all right, all right, Craig. Thanks so much for your time, folks. Again, I'm going to say it again. Good Strong Hands RPG on Kickstarter from NerdBurger Games starting September 22nd. Have some whimsical fun fighting off a nihilism with, I guess it has a brain, purposeful nihilism. I don't know. Can that even be a thing?
Yeah, it's got an agenda.
It's got nihilism with an agenda. Nihilism with an agenda. So, all right. Well, Craig, thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. And folks, we'll catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening.
Go Bears!
Go Bears!
We have to go.
No, I can't make it. My hover stabilization's gone, my main circuit's blown, and both backups are failing.
You can make it.
It's no use, Vincent. My useful days are finished. But part of me goes with you. You'll never be obsolete. Carry on the tradition. We're the best.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.